I was just stupefied by this. I was just shocked. And I got a little mental download that I had a choice that I had to make up my mind pretty quick. If I wanted to cross over to the next world, they were there for me, and they're to welcome me to the other side. And but it was almost like they said, "Are you sure you want to exit right now? Life on Earth is very fragile and precious, and you might want to think about it." So, just in an instant, I decided that it would be really cool to keep living here in three-dimensional reality, knowing that we do live in a multi-dimensional existence. There is life on the other side of the veil. There's a lot going on over there. It's almost very similar to, how if you have a dream at night and then you wake up in the morning, you're kind of relieved and you go, oh, that was just a dream. It's sort of like that. My perception of death now is like that, is that when you finally pass and your body quits working, there's like this realization. It's like, oh, there's this other realm that I'm quite familiar with, and, I'm waking back up into that now. So I ran back into the house and got my keys and drove myself to the hospital, and they weren't really set up to take me. I knew I wasn't going to die because I had just had this encounter, and I just had this choice that I made. And so I made it to the hospital okay, and I gave the guy the keys and asked if he would park my car and bring it to me. And then they wheeled me into a little room in a wheelchair, and here, morphine, and the doctor came out, and he says, you are having a heart attack. We're not set up for it. We got to ship you up to Ball Hospital. So they rolled me back out in the sun on the way to the ambulance, and I'm just thinking, oh, this is really cool. I get to ride in an ambulance with the siren going. I always wanted to know what that was like, being on the inside. And there was two EMTs in there. One was a guy in his 50s, and the other was a younger woman, and they kept looking up at the monitor with worried looks on their faces, and they thought they were going to lose me. And I wanted to humor them because I didn't want them to worry about me. I knew I was going to be fine. And I told them a story that the previous weekend at the campground, I'd gotten stung by a bee on my ankle, and I heard the guy say under his breath, he'll think bee sting when he gets to that calf lab. And that kind of stuck in my head. It's like, what's he talking about, So when I got up to Ball Hospital, the doctors were waiting for me, all scrubbed up, ready to go. They were ready to do a quadruple bypass. And they said that we can try some stents, but, the bypass would be a better option. Well, I was always kind of afraid of the crab cracker operation, where they saw your sternum in half and they crank you open and, yank a vein out of your leg. So I thought I was going to try a couple of stents. So I actually got to watch them do that. I was sedated to the point where when they stuck the needle in the femoral artery, then I remembered what the EMT had told me on the ambulance. Oh, that's what he meant, because I don't know what it was they gave me, Versed or whatever, but it's like I knew that hurt really bad if I cared, but I don't care. So I got to watch on TV, then put two stents in. But then when they wheeled me out of there, one of the entities that showed up in my yard to welcome me to the other side, one of the ones that were still living a life here on Earth, was a woman that I had broken up with like a year previous to that because she wanted to get married and I didn't. And she was standing there with tears on her eyes because they wouldn't let her in because she was not family. So I decided to fix that. I told myself I was going to fix it right then when they wheeled me out of there to my hospital room. I stayed one night overnight. And 2 months later, we flew to Las Vegas, and we both got married by a Dracula impersonator. So, and it was at that point when I was standing there in Las Vegas 2 months after this incident, where the smoke came down over the stage, and then the curtains were drawn, and the coffin comes out and opens up with a creak. And this guy in whiteface, Dracula impersonator, steps out and marries the two of us. I thought, well, I'm really glad I stayed alive because I wouldn't have wanted to miss this. So this October, Julie and I will have been married for 10 years. So I guess it was meant to be. It worked out really great. And she has been very tolerant in my whole adventure into the UFO field because, as I mentioned, I started researching near-death experiences, and that led me eventually into the ghosts, and it led me into cryptids like Mothman and Bigfoot, and it's all interconnected. And then I fell into the rabbit hole of ufology, and it started out with the ancient cases. Pastor Barry Downing wrote an excellent book called Flying Saucers in the Bible, and he talks about the incident in Ezekiel, which is obviously some type of craft landing. And then there's channeled material like the Prism of Lyra, the Urantia book, the Oahspe Bible. I'm not somebody that expects perfection out of channeled material because it's coming through a human brain. But what I recognize that when I'm reading something or I'm listening to it on audio, if it resonates with me, I keep it. If it doesn't, I just kind of put it in a file. Maybe I'll use that some other time. But according to the Prism of Lyra, humanoids in this galaxy started out in the Lyra constellation. And there's apparently humanoids all throughout the galaxy. It's a pretty common form. And Morris K. Jessup, in his books, The Case for the UFO and The Expanded Case for the UFO, Dr. Jacques Vallée, Don Keel, all the authors paint a pretty interesting picture about what I call crypto reality. It's a reality that's interacting with the human race on a daily basis, and if you're not open to it, you'll be oblivious to it. So I've had a really good time in the last 9 years researching UFOs, and I've also, what it did was trigger some memories that at the time they happened, I didn't really know where to put them. For example, in 1961, when I was 6 years old, one of my very first childhood memories kicks in. My mother had just put me to bed, and she left the room, and I was all settled in, and out of my peripheral vision, I saw two figures. And I remember turning my little head over there, and there was two what people today call shadow people, and they sort of floated over to the bed, and they reached down as if they were checking me out somehow, and they stood back up, looked at each other, and just vanished. And that has always stuck in my mind. Out of all the memories and dreams and everything I've had in 63 years of living, this one incident that happened when I was 6 years old just has stuck to me like glue, and I've thought about it pretty often. And I've wondered in my mind, was this just like a photo after effect when my mother turned the light off, or were these actual beings, interdimensional beings that came over? And I'm of the proclivity now to think that they were intelligences from another realm that possibly I knew in between lifetimes. Russ, stopping by to check on me.
Well, too, when I was young, I was probably, I can't remember the exact age, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, maybe. Every summer I would get, shipped to my grandmother's and my uncle's house in Oakland, California. And my grandmother lived in an old apartment that was made in the late 1800s. Of course, we're talking, in the 60s here. But I got to stay in this one bedroom, the master bedroom. And I'll tell you, it had like one of these walk-in closets that the bed folds down. And the first night I was in that bed, the nightlight was on in the closet. I saw a shadow come out. And it went around the whole room, stopped, and then slowly went back into that closet. And I'll tell you, when you're a little kid, you see something like that, you put the blankets over your head. You're scared. And it doesn't go away. I remember that so vividly that is going to be in my brain to the day I die.
Sure, and it's really nice to, if you have an awakening experience, like either an abduction experience or other contact modality like I had, a near-death experience, all of a sudden these early childhood memories that you just kind of locked away in your brain somewhere and you didn't really know what to think about it make sense. When I was 11 in 1966, I was walking down the driveway on a nice day down in Titusville, Florida, and all of a sudden I looked up and there was 5 pewterish, silvery type hovering discs just stationary. It was almost like they were just painted into the sky. And as an 11-year-old in 1966, my response was to drop to my knees and start bawling. I was just crying. And the thing that was on my mind as an 11-year-old is I was afraid that the saucers were going to disappear without me because I wanted to go home. And that memory stuck with me, but I just didn't really know where to categorize that experience. And as it turns out, throughout the literature that's in the public domain, 1966 was a global UFO wave. That was the same year that John Keel went to Point Pleasant, Virginia, and investigated the Mothman sightings. So there was a lot going on in 1966, and it's kind of a coincidental year for me. And then through Facebook, after 32 years, I got reconnected with a woman named Mary, And we got to talking down memory lane, what we used to do in Bloomington and stuff. And we went to a sales convention in 1979. I was selling insurance for a combined insurance company. And I remember leaving the convention about 1 o'clock. And then the next thing I remember, I was pulling up in her driveway when it was daylight, about 6 o'clock in the morning. And she goes, "You don't remember that?" And I said, "What?" And she goes, "You don't remember what happened?" I said, "No." And she says, she tells me this whole story. I'm just sort of stunned on the other end of the phone. She's telling me this whole story that she saw a tree-level luminous orb that grew bigger, and she thought it was chasing the car. So she told me to put the pedal to the metal and go faster. And that clicked in a memory. I do remember that. I do remember her telling me in a panic to go faster. But that's about all I remember until the next morning. And we went our separate ways after that. I was really fatigued, and I asked to sleep on her couch. And she told me, and I was just dumbfounded when she told me this. She said that the dress that she wore, she bought special for this sales convention I went to, but it was all muddy from head to toe. And while I was sleeping on her couch all day, she burnt her dress on the outdoor barbecue grill because she felt violated, and wanted to get in touch with Bud Hopkins, a UFO abduction researcher, and he said that she would have to get a hold of me, and she lost track of me. So for 32 years, there was this experience that I shared with this other person that had just completely vacated my mind, and she had to remind me of the details. And one of the strange things was she told me that I drove a green Toyota Tercel, and I'm sort of a car guy. I remember I get emotionally attached to them, and I remember every car I ever owned. But I do not remember owning that car at all. I had to call my brother in Bloomington and ask him, and he said, "Yeah, I do remember that automobile." So she's telling the truth about the car, and filled me in on the experiences. So I may have had, some type of abduction experience, but if I did, my memory was sealed, and I want to leave it that way. People ask me, "Why don't you get hypnotically regressed?" And I said, well, there's a reason, if that sort of thing happened, there's a reason that my memory was blocked, and I just want to leave it that way. So then later in life, at the age of 54, I had this fantastic anomalous near-death experience where beings showed up in my yard for me to help me to the other side. So it's been quite a journey, and kind of it reminds me of that movie, Jacob's Ladder. I don't know if you ever saw that, but about the Vietnam vets that were given some kind of psychedelic. Oh, yeah. And they're trying to piece together their past. I sort of feel that way because there's a lot of things that have happened to me in life that were kind of weird that I just categorized in the what-if category that now makes sense to me. But I eventually compiled all my personal notes about my UFO investigations. In 2016, I published my book, Overlords of the Singularity, and it has good reviews on Amazon, and the people that have read it say they really enjoyed the material. But the one thing that hit me in all of the researchers like Dr. Jacques Vallée and John Keel is there was always this technological aspect of it. Jacques Vallée said he thought the UFO phenomena was a control mechanism for human consciousness. And, of course, John Keel coined the term ultra-terrestrial. He did not buy into the extraterrestrial hypothesis, but thought that human beings coexisted on Earth with some other type of intelligence that we don't know anything about that resides in the invisible realms of the electromagnetic spectrum and selectively interacts with humanity from time to time. And there's two different types of contacts that happen. One is expansive, where the person, their IQ can change and get higher. All of a sudden they develop psychic abilities. Sometimes they quit their job, they divorce their wife, they turn vegan, they just completely change their life. And it's an expansive sort of experience. Dr. John Mack talks a lot about that in Passport to the Cosmos, that the abductees that he interviewed felt that it was something to do with consciousness elevation and their passport into the larger cosmos at large. This apparently is some sort of school where we learn certain lessons, and then I guess at some point you get to graduate into the higher density realms. Well, but then there's the, yeah.
Well, I was going to say, too, from Calvin Parker to a lot of major guests that, say that they have been abducted. One thing I do ask some questions, and the questions that they felt violated, it was one of the very top answers I get. And then I asked him, I said, are these entities, that abducted you, do you get the feeling they're here to serve man? And I even